Hello and welcome back to Planetos Podcast for episode 35, a discussion on House Estermont. We're continuing to focus on minor characters and houses as we wait for the winds of winter. I am one of your hosts, Travis. You can find me at Sir_Travis on Twitter.
I'm another one of your hosts, Brett. You can find me at Homely Pillow on Twitter.
And I am the third of your hosts, Micah, and you can find me at Micah_of_Clark on Twitter.
We're glad to be back. We are excited to talk about this really minor house. The Estermonts are interesting, I think is a good word to describe them. There's some information on them in the historical book. There's some information on them in the main series. And then they could have a part to play in the Winds of Winter that could be dramatic, perhaps, but there's not a lot with these guys and girls, and so maybe we can figure out a little more tonight about them. So, just like we've done with previous episodes, I'm going to talk a little bit about the history of the house, history of some of those characters from Estermont, and then we'll talk about their place in the main series before we speculate where they could be, what they could be doing in the Winds of Winter and beyond.
I will have to say they were a little bit frustrating to research, especially like going to chapters where they're mentioned and they get like one little mention, and I'm like, dang it, and I have to move on to the next chapter to find a little more.
Yeah, they're really minor.
Yeah, they are very minor.
Well, I listened to this one of the Catelyn chapters and from Clash of Kings, and I think they just mentioned a banner, like she saw a banner, and I'm like, dang it, like I mean it's a good chapter, but
right, yeah, it almost kind of seems like George doesn't create them until a Clash of Kings, or he had them in mind, but he kept them for a Clash of Kings, which is the material that we get. So let's get into this. Let's talk about the Estermonts. Of course, they are a noble house in the Stormlands, and they are one of the principal houses sworn to House Baratheon of Storm's End. They rule from the castle Greenstone, which is on the island of Estermont. So the island's name is Estermont. The house's name is Estermont. And Estermont is just east of Cape Wrath. So Cape Wrath is right now the land and holdings of Sir Davos Seaworth. Or I should say Lord Davos Seaworth. He is the hand to the king, after all. Their sigil is a dark green sea turtle on pale green, and their motto is unknown. We do not know if the Estermonts are of Andal or Firstmen ancestry. Following the Andal invasion, many of the Storm Kings of House Durrandon and their bannermen, all Firstmen, intermarried with the Andals. So it's likely that Estermont blood is intermingled with Firstmen Westerosi blood. We just don't know if the Estermonts were created after the Andal invasion or they were around under the Storm King's rule prior to. We just don't know that. So a couple notable Estermonts from history and some of the other works that George has produced in the world of A Song of Ice and Fire there is a elderly Lord Estermont. There always seems to be an old Lord Estermont in these stories. He actually marries Larissa Valerion, who was the friend of Rhaena Targaryen. He married her in 55 AC. Sir Duncan the Tall, then just known as Dunk, notes that the Estermont banner is flying at the Ashford Meadow tournament in the Hedge Knight. And he notes that Sir Gunther Estermont rode in the lists that day. So that's really the historical significance and historical information of House Estermont. Prior to the main series, Cassana Estermont, daughter of the old Lord Estermont, we hear about in a Game of Thrones and a Clash of Kings, weds Lord Stefan Baratheon and has 3 sons, Robert, Stannis, and Renly. She and her husband, of course, drown on the Windproud when the ship is caught in a severe storm off Shipbreaker Bay. They had been returning from an unsuccessful quest to the Free Cities to find a bride for Prince Rhaegar Targaryen. We also know that from Cersei's one of Cersei's chapters, I think it's Cersei 5 in A Feast for Crows, that King Robert's Estermont uncles remained at court in King's Landing for about half a year following his wedding to Cersei Lannister. Robert then decides to repay their visit by taking Cersei and much of the royal court to Greenstone, which she famously called green shit, for a 2-week stay. While there, Cersei suspects Robert was bedding his widowed Estermont cousin he used to play with as a child, so she sends Jaime to follow the king to confirm her suspicions. Cersei and Jaime then sleep together on Greenstone, and she believes that was the night Joffrey was conceived. Old Lord Estermont was one of the insulting matches Prince Doran Martell proposed his daughter, Princess Arianne Martell, to. So that's kind of the historical information and where they are at the start of the series. So I want to talk about the Estermonts that we get in the main series. They are few and far between, but there's a bit of a discrepancy on how exactly they're related to the Baratheons. Now we know how they're related to the Baratheons. We know that Cassana Estermont was Robert Renly and Stannis's mother. That is not in dispute. What is in dispute is the fact that somewhere along the way, George either made a mistake or made a change, and so we don't know exactly how a couple of these Estermonts are related to Renly and Stannis specifically. So here's what we get from the Clash of Kings and A Storm of Swords appendix. There is a Sir Lomas Estermont who is uncle to Stannis and Renly. He has a son, Sir Andrew, who is a cousin to Stannis and Renly. Then there is a Sir Eldon Estermont, uncle to Stannis and Renly. He has a son, Sir Aemon Estermont, who is a cousin to Stannis and Renly. And he has a son, Sir Alan Estermont. In A Feast for Crows, it clarifies titles and adds exactly where these individuals are at the end of the book, or at the end of Feast for Crows and A Dance with Dragons. Lord Eldon Estermont, Lord of Greenstone, an uncle to King Stannis, and a great uncle to King Tommen, and a cautious friend to both, it says. His son, Sir Aemon, Lord Eldon's son, and King Tommen, with King Tommen in King's Landing. Sir Aemon Estermont is in King's Landing. Then Sir Aemon's son, Sir Alan, who is also in King's Landing. Sir Lomas, brother of Lord Eldon, uncle and supporter of King Stannis. He is currently at Storm's End. And his son, Sir Andrew, Sir Lomas's son, and he is actually protecting Edric Storm. He is one of the individuals that Davos sends to take Edric Storm across the Narrow Sea. Now, A Dance with Dragons is where this kind of screws up, because Lord Eldon becomes a great uncle to Stannis and Renly. So basically, just to back up and say, there's an old Lord Estermont who, in A Clash of Kings, declares for his grandson and liege lord, Renly Baratheon. Catelyn sees the green sea turtles in Renly's camp, Renly actually gives his grandfather command of his reserve in the looming battle with Stannis at Storm's End. And after Renly is rightfully killed, the Estermonts, like most other of the Storm Lords, turn to Stannis. At the parley at Storm's End with Sir Courtney Penrose, old Lord Estermont is present. He argues against storming the castle walls and instead suggests a duel with Sir Courtney or a long siege to starve them out. He also refuses to turn to the religion of the Lord of Light. He refuses to turn to the religion of the Lord of Light and asks to fight beneath the Crown Stag banner instead of the Flaming Heart. Banners of Estermont are spotted in Stannis' van as they approach King's Landing. Lord Estermont and his men fight at the Blackwater. Old Lord Estermont, his son Sir Aemon, and his grandson Sir Alan are captured. They're made prisoners, and they eventually bend the knee to Joffrey. Sir Lomas, his other son, and Sir Andrew, his other grandson, escape the battle and lead part of the Greenstone men in remaining loyal to Stannis. Now, somewhere around 300 AC, not too far after this, it's either right as the story begins, or it's sort of after a Clash of Kings, or somewhere around there. It's theorized that this old Lord Estermont dies, and Eldon Estermont, who, like we said before, was either his son or his brother, inherits the title of Lord of Greenstone. In A Storm of Swords, Lord Eldon Estermont is a guest at the Purple Wedding and declares at Tyrion's trial that he saw Tyrion pick up the chalice as Joffrey was dying and pour the remaining wine onto the floor. As we said before, Sir Andrew Estermont helps Davos Seaworth smuggle Edric Storm off Dragonstone. He sails away with the boy commanding the escort. The Estermont banner is seen at Castle Black after Stannis' arrival. In A Feast for Crows, Qyburn reports to Cersei that Lord Eldon has married Silva Santagar. I think her nickname is Spotted Silva, if I remember correctly. She's a childhood friend to Arianne Martell, and she's one of Arianne's co-conspirators in the plot to make Marcella Queen of Westeros. Silva is sent to Greenstone to marry Lord Eldon. Sir Lomas remains at Storm's End, where he's loyal to Stannis. He is defending the castle as the army of the Reach besieges it. And then in A Dance with Dragons, we find out that Mark Mandrake, a commander of the Golden Company, has landed on Estermont and has taken the island and the castle for Aegon VI. All right, guys, that's what we know about House Estermont. Those are the individuals. It's a little confusing, like I said. Mm-hmm. So I want to talk about where the Estermonts are currently in 3 different storylines. There are some of them with Stannis at the wall. We can assume, obviously, that they're marching on Winterfell with him. It doesn't seem there are any named Estermonts there. We've accounted for the 5 or so named Estermonts in the story and where they are. So there could just be Estermont cavalry or Estermont pikemen or archers or whatever with him. We obviously then have the Golden Company landing in the Stormlands, so the Estermonts are going to be tied up in that.
I feel bad for that one.
Really. Then we have the Estermonts in King's Landing. And then we actually have Sir Andrew, who is with Edric Storm. So actually we have about 4 different storylines that they're potentially involved in. Some of those are going to come crashing together, right?
Yeah, I think most of them are going to converge.
Right. The Stannis one, potentially not. I don't think he's coming back south. There's a lot of distance there. But really, we've got Stannis, we've got Aegon VI, and we've got the Lannisters. So we've kind of already mentioned Stannis. We don't really have a named Estermont with them.
No.
He's got some soldiers with him. We all assume that Stannis will take Winterfell, and then he'll either be forced back to the wall or have to go back to the wall or whatever. So I would assume those Estermont men eventually die with him.
Yeah, most likely.
Yeah. So let's then focus in on our three remaining storylines: the Golden Company, Edric Storm, and King's Landing. So what do we think happens with the Estermonts that are on Estermont, the island at the Castle Greenstone, and the Estermonts at Storm's End? And I want to throw out a couple things here. One's tinfoil, so bear with me as I throw it out there.
Okay.
The first question I'll ask is, could Lord Eldon Estermont be named Lord of Storm's End by Aegon VI? And the second question is, could there be another bastard of Robert Baratheon at Greenstone? Let's think back to the fact that Robert had had a sexual relationship with his Estermont cousin at Greenstone, and Cersei actually remembers that. She relays it in Cersei 5 and A Feast for Crows. So if he produced a bastard that night, the same night that Joffrey was conceived, then potentially you've got another Baratheon bastard that would be about 14, 15, somewhere around there.
That's interesting.
Now, the thing I'll caveat again, that's tinfoil.
Yeah.
There's so many of Robert's bastards out there, and we know that potentially Edric Storm could come right back into the equation here with the Golden Company. So, Micah, I'm gonna pitch those questions to you first.
Well, with Lord Eldon being named Lord of Storm's End, that could be something that could happen for a short while before they potentially get to King's Landing, and Varys would be like, "Oh, I just got this bastard of Robert here, Edric. He could be Lord of Storm's End instead," because Eldon is 80, and he's already Lord of Greenstone, so it could be for a short while. Maybe not. It's pretty up in the air.
Mm-hmm.
As for Robert having another bastard at Greenstone, I don't see why not. He's got bastards everywhere else. So that's not something I'll entirely rule out or rule in.
Yeah. What worries, I'm kind of on the same boat as Micah. What I will say is John Conn and his comments about not burning the village and not or wanting to be more like Tywin, that could potentially be a grisly end for a lot of the Estermonts in that area, or whichever Estermonts are in that area. So I'm not sure.
Yeah, I mean,
especially which Estermont's holding Storm's End? Lomas.
Yeah.
I that dude might be doomed. I mean,
I think he is.
Yeah.
Yeah, he's still loyal to Stannis, and he's been loyal to Stannis since
he's
Clash of Kings.
Yeah,
so
he's been really portrayed as loyal. So I think that he's either going to fight to the bitter end, Blackfish in the Show style, or one of the guys. I think Elwood Meadows, I'm pretty sure, is someone who switched back and forth. He could take him out.
Yeah.
Yeah. And what's interesting is, depending on which appendix is right, Sir Lomas is Lord Eldon's brother or son. So, if his father is captured and bends the knee to Aegon the Sixth, then potentially he could bend the knee, or he could just hold out. I mean, there's that potential. There's also potential that his father was killed. Lord Eldon was killed in the taking of Greenstone, so he could already be dead. The reason I ask this is, and I'll ask this and then I'll answer my own question, because the reason I ask this is, Aegon's going to want to put people in place. These kings want to put lords in place that are loyal to them and to offer some legitimacy. So he's going to want to leave someone in charge of Storm's End and the Stormlands, which he has effectively taken, and especially when he wipes out Mace Tyrell's army in Westeros Agincourt.
Which I see where you're going with this. If they find a bastard on Greenstone,
so if they find a bastard on Greenstone, they could legitimize him. Now, the option is there for Edric Storm to have already been captured.
Yeah, that
by the Golden Company, and I think there's a lot of potential there for that, because Varys is collecting Robert's bastards, not just Robert's bastards, but he's collecting noble children. He's got Tyrek Lannister, probably. He's got all of these other people that he's going to be able to say to Aegon, okay, here's your Warden of the West. Here's a Lannister. Here's your Lord of Storm's End. His name is Edric Storm. Let's legitimize him. We know, and Edric, of all people, actually in Westeros has noble blood, because he is both Robert Baratheon's son and the son of a Florent. So he has, even though he's a bastard, he's a noble bastard. So I think the potential is already there for them to have Edric Storm, and they don't need another bastard. It was just a thought to throw out there to say, could this be the bastard that they put in charge of Storm's End?
Yeah, I mean, it's.
But Edric makes much more sense, because I think he needs to come back into the story, right?
Yeah, and that's where I was going. Yeah, it makes more sense for him. But I mean, who knows? Because it could be, another plot point to where now the Stormlands are divided, because you got the Lannisters or Aegon using one, and one of the bastards, and then it could go. The most likely is Edric Storm, but
yeah. All right, so let's talk about the Estermonts that are in King's Landing, and those are Sir Aemon, Lord Eldon's son. He's currently supportive of King Tommen. And then we have Sir Alan, Sir Aemon's son, also in King's Landing with his father. So what do we think happens with these Estermonts?
Ooh, I don't really have an answer at this moment. So someone
it gets back to
long story short. I mean, possibly their demise could be, if King's Landing blows up, but between then and where we're at now and then, I'm not really sure.
I think that if Eldon joins Fagon, I think that they'll end up going with him, and they'll stay in King's Landing, but they'll be on Fagon's side. Then they'll probably stay there until they get nuked.
Yeah, and it sort of even ties back into the fact that the Estermonts, being the family of Stannis, have to sort of abandon him like all the rest of the lords do when he ultimately meets his demise. Now, what is important to note about that is Stannis isn't even in the South, so it's pretty easy to abandon someone who's not right there fighting that you can see.
Yeah.
Additionally, depending on how widespread the news is that Stannis is dead, and I'm putting quotations around that because we know he's potentially going to fake his own death to get into Winterfell. When he sends Justin Massey to Braavos, he says, you may even hear that I'm dead, and it may even be true. So how widespread is that news going to be? So the Estermonts could say, well, shit, the king is dead. Now Aegon Targaryen has showed up on our doorstep, and he also has he has Robert's bastard. Well, we don't really have any other option here. We've got to bend the knee to this guy, to this kid. I think eventually they fall into Aegon's list of supporters.
Well, they seem pretty loyal to Stannis. Even the ones in King Landing. I mean, they're probably bending the knee out of duress. So, that is a good. That sounds like very plausible that they'd hear he's dead and they feel like they have no other option because Stannis is gone, and then, or in quotes, he's gone, and they have to make a hard choice.
They could also be forced to do it if, say, Lomas Estermont over in Storm's End dies, but Andrew Estermont, who is with Edric Storm, could also be a casualty if he doesn't want to bring Edric Storm back. If he goes out too, Aemon and Alan might be forced to bend the knee just so as they can live.
Yeah. I feel like, oh man, I feel bad for this family now. Like, because it's looking very bleak for them.
I think they're going to be wiped out.
Yeah.
I mean,
House Estermont's going to be on that chopping block.
Yeah.
Just hope Phyllis Stanfield lives.
They're going to have to be one of the houses to and I think the other important thing to note in their coming allegiance to Aegon the Sixth is Silva Santagar is the new Lady Estermont. So she's right there in the castle. She is best friends with Arianne Martell. When Arianne shows up with Dornish support for Fagon and might even take his hand in marriage, well, Silva Santagar is going to tell her old husband, who should probably Roxy's World at night, she's probably going to say, we're supporting Aegon, and he's probably going to be like, okay. So
yeah.
That's our new impression of Lord Eldon Estermont, everybody.
Yeah.
Okay. That's me imagining being a 75-year-old man with a spicy Dornish young wife who,
oh God,
says, this is what you're going to do, and I'm gonna be, okay, yes, ma'am.
Whatever you say,
please. Oh gosh. Well, I mean, you don't want to betray the Dornish. They'll slit your throat in the middle of the night or something.
Yeah,
or just scorpion in your bed.
Stereotype for the Dornish. Yep. Please don't kill me.
Please don't kill me.
I'm just little old Eldon Estermont.
So, any other thoughts on House Estermont? I mean, they're so minor, and they're going to be wrapped up on a lot in the Winds of Winter, but they're going to be one of these tertiary characters, tertiary houses that are just kind of out there.
I kind of feel like we might see more of them in this next and the Winds of Winter, just based off our little theories we have here going, just because it seems like their storyline might end in the Dance of the Dragons, if the second one, if that theory comes true.
there is a good point to be made that, the Golden Company has a naval force. They have ships that brought them. Some of those have been destroyed. Some of those have been wrecked. Estermont, they're not going to have a huge fleet, but they are, along with Selwyn Tarth, the Tarths of Tarth, all of these families that have the same name as their island drive me kind of crazy.
Yeah.
They could potentially have some ships that could help get the Golden Company and Aegon's supporters to King's Landing. Maybe the Tarths and the Estermonts were the fleet, if you will, for the Stormlands forever. You've got the Pirate King out there. You've got Orain Waters, who's probably going to fall in line with Aegon. Now he only has 3 Drummonds out there, but then you also have Salador San somewhere out there as well.
Yeah.
So they could potentially fall in with Aegon. So Aegon's probably going to have enough ships, but the Estermonts could also provide ships to a massive fleet for the Golden Company to blockade King's Landing.
Well, I guess I didn't even think of this option. I mean, Daenerys has to get over somehow. Like, who's going to provide her ships?
Well, she has a fleet.
The
Ironborn and
the Iron Fleet will probably join her.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Another interesting angle is with Lord Eldemont with Estermont. While I was researching, they come in a Clash of Kings, and a lot of them are shown in a Clash of Kings and built up. I think it's interesting that they do at around the same time when George is bringing Aegon into his story. This is around the time when he decides to change from having Dany fight the Lannisters in his original outline that he published into having her fight another Targaryen, probably fake. And it's interesting that he brings in not just the Estermonts, but a lot of Stormlands houses and Reach houses, all of whom he's preparing and seeding in these various positions. And I think Estermont is definitely one of those higher ups that he planted ahead of time, so as he could have them in these particular spots: King's Landing, Storm's End, with Edric, and then up with Stannis.
Yeah, and
good point.
And that's why, I mean, you see them early on, and that's kind of why I thought, they haven't been, with what we're speculating here is, the ending of their story may come in the Winds of Winter. But they've been sprinkled without, but now we might finally get to see them in action and see how that wraps up for them, whether, one of them survives or this family gets wiped out, because, one of them might survive and, get granted back their titles and lands. And then from there on out, they take a back seat as, a very minor character again. And then, but they're there, in the final fight. But I feel like
one of the ones that have to rebuild.
Yeah. But I feel like their family's story is going to mainly wrap up with this next book.
Yeah, I agree.
Yeah, probably. All right. Final thoughts on Estermont. Anything else?
I think that was pretty much it for me.
I don't like to see such a loyal family to the one and the one true king, but get wiped out. So hopefully they have somewhat of a happy ending.
All right, so I just want to end the conversation then on the fact that turtles are a favorite of George R.R. Martin. And he has a couple houses in Westeros that feature a tortoise or a turtle on their banner, but this seems to be the most prominent, and I think it's one of the earliest that features a turtle on their sigil. And this dates back to when George was a child. He had pet turtles. I think he famously said, he wasn't able to have a dog or a cat or whatever. So he had these turtles and he would write stories for them. And he would imagine, turtles having wars and fighting over crowns, lands and stuff. And so that's kind of where his some of his storytelling started. So he would say that the turtles lived in a castle, and Martin would pretend that they were knights and kings, and he made up stories in which they betrayed and killed each other and fought for their kingdoms. Martin even said that Game of Thrones started with his turtles. And we know that George famously wears a hat with a turtle pin on it, and has claimed that turtles have always been my sigil. So, I don't think it's as we discuss it, I don't think George has master plans for House Estermont. I think he just, needed a house on this island off the coast of the Stormlands, and their sigil turned out to be a turtle, and a sea turtle, because they are living on an island and are of the sea, as you can see with Greyjoys and red wine. Well, red wines are grapes. That's because they're an arbor. I don't know why I was trying to make that. There. But anyways, many of the houses who serve either in ports like the Manderleys or on islands, have a sigil that's related to the sea or to their trade or whatever with the sea. So just a little interesting tidbit there about George and turtles. His favorite animal.
Yep.
Yeah, nice. I like turtles. Turtles are nice creatures.
Yeah, they're sort of emotionless, but
They are. Although there's this really good video of a turtle chasing a ball, and it moved pretty fast to get that ball.
Determination.
In like 7th grade, I had this science teacher who she was kind of mean, but rightfully so, because the kids,
7th graders are.
Yeah, she liked me because I was quiet and did my work, but she hated like everybody though. Like I didn't want her to like me, but but anyways, she had these 2 turtles, and I guess they were both males. And one day, like, we walked in and we noticed one of the heads were missing on one of them, and I guess she explained it. One of the turtles tried to mate with the other, or they were, I don't know, something happened. Maybe they got territorial or something, but basically one, stuck its head out and the other one just, and like took its head clean off. It's a very sad end to that turtle. Wow. So they're vicious. They are vicious. So there's something to be said by that. So
I can see turtle being vicious. I mean, they just, patiently wait.
Oh yeah.
So. All right. Well, that does it for our discussion on House Estermont, one of the minor houses that could play a pretty interesting role in the continuing story of A Song of Ice and Fire when we finally get the Winds of Winter. We thank you for listening. We thank you for visiting. Please rate and review us on iTunes and other podcasting platforms. Follow us on Twitter at Planetos Podcast. Like us on Facebook and Instagram. And we will see you around Planetos. Good night, everyone.
See ya.
Have a good one.